So, for this piece of news update for Tower Defense Simulator, we need to go all the way back to 2023, basically over 2 years actually, to the 12th of September 2023, where Below Natural posted this tweet saying, it looks like Nova Animated has literally reanimated the giant boss, coming to a huge update in the near future. And obviously this is a animation of the giant boss. Now, this was posted by Below Natural on the 12th of September 2023, and Below Natural did nothing about this. Now, it was speculated that this was going to be part of the Fallen mode rework. As one would expect, the giant boss appears in Fallen mode, so one would assume that once Fallen mode was reworked, the giant boss would appear. However, initially, that wasn't the case. This was the giant boss's appearance when it was removed, i.e. in 2024, the 2nd of August 2024, when the Fallen boss was reworked in Fallen mode. It was actually replaced by the Fallen Giant. This is what the Fallen Giant looks like, and if you compare that image to the Fallen boss that we saw from leaks, you'll notice that it looks very similar. This is green with like green veins here and a knife in the back. If you go all the way to the Fallen Giant, you'll see it's exactly the same, except this is blue. And given the fact that Fallen mode has a purple/blue appearance, it kind of makes sense why the Fallen Giant replaces the giant boss. Now, the giant boss, I think what the developers thought was that because the giant boss only appears in Fallen mode, there is really no need to like change up its appearance and add the new appearance of the giant boss. However, that's not the case. The giant boss still appears, perhaps accidentally, in intermediate mode, because in intermediate mode what the giant boss can do is it can be spawned in by the patient zero. The problem is, obviously, the giant boss can't appear naturally, so it looks really weird when once the giant boss is spawned in amongst the other enemies, which has a modern appearance. So if you look at like the failed experiment, the Breaker 4, Breaker 3, Breaker 4, Breaker 3, they kind of look out of place. But then if you look at like the Speedy Boss, Hazmat, Living Experiments, Reaver, yeah, these enemies, they look like they are currently made. They look modern. Whereas if you looked at the giant boss previously with this image, yeah, it doesn't look very befitting at all, does it? I mean, there's also the case where the giant boss also appears in Legacy Fallen mode and Hardcore mode, but since those game modes are pretty much outdated, I mean, Legacy Fallen mode, it's literally stated in the name, Legacy, whereas Hardcore mode is going to get reworked sometime in the future, maybe 2030. There is no need to update the giant boss. However, you've probably seen this, the developers have now actually updated the appearance for the giant boss. Now, this is more than just its appearance in the middle of the game for intermediate mode. So if you go to your index and then you were to search up the giant boss, they've actually updated it there. However, what they haven't done is they haven't updated the icon. They have updated the appearance, as you can see here. Now, one would assume that the developers, they probably realized, oh wait, we have this random arse enemy, which is really outdated, that appears in, say, intermediate mode, because, I don't know, the wiki lists it. I talked to the developers at Roblox Developer Conference. They do actually look at the wiki, and they probably realised that, oh wait, Patient Zero spawns in the giant boss, and it looks hella ugly. Maybe they played it. Likely what they did was they played it during the takeover, and once they were testing the takeover, and Patient Zero appeared and spawned in a giant boss, they were like, wait, the giant boss still appears in its old form. Maybe we should update it. Oh wait, don't we have a model that we can update it to? Yes, indeed we can. We're going to update it. Although, interestingly enough, the giant boss, even though it's stated as an exclusive enemy, it kind of is, it can be gotten through intermediate mode, and it can also be gotten through hardcore mode. Getting one means that you also get the other. So if you get the hardcore mode version, which is this version, you'll get the intermediate mode version. Whereas if you get the intermediate mode version, you'll get the hardcore mode version, and vice versa. Now, this does mean that outside of hardcore mode, this is an enemy that is extremely rarely appearing. So we'll just have to wait for Patient Zero to actually spawn in some enemies. But trust me, when Patient Zero spawns in some enemies, you'll notice the Patient Zero is, or well, it should, well, it hasn't. So the giant boss can appear from the Patient Zero spawn, it's just that it doesn't always appear from Patient Zero's spawn. Or does it ever now? What's going on? Yes, 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 right. Here you see Giant Boss has now appeared, and it has the modern form. This is the only way, outside of hardcore mode, of getting the Giant Boss. The Giant Boss doesn't appear naturally in Fallen mode anymore. It doesn't appear in any of the other game modes anymore. So the only way to get the logbook for the Giant Boss outside of hardcore mode is to get it through Patient Zero. So if you do have access to hardcore mode, it's pretty easy to get the Giant Boss's logbook. I think it appears more than 60 times in hardcore mode, so I think you should be fine. However, you may notice that, yes, even though Patient Zero is spawning enemies, it does rarely appear. The Giant Boss has a 5% chance of spawning in from Patient Zero when it does its enemy spawning in attack. So even if you were to see the Giant Boss through Patient Zero, it's going to look very unlikely that you'll get its logbook, and I think it's probably the rarest enemy to appear in the 5 normal game modes, not including hardcore mode. Now actually, this wasn't a change that was made in v1.74.3, it was actually a change made in v1.74.3c. The developers didn't actually update it until quite recently, and in fact they didn't update it until today, as I record this video, the 18th of September, where they have finally changed it. Now, just to point out that the updated version of the Giant Boss doesn't appear everywhere as you might expect. It appears in Intermediate mode as displayed previously, Modern Sandbox mode, the Takeover Pro, and all of the challenge maps, which, fair enough, I think the challenge maps, they deserve better quality enemies, even though I think some enemies there are still kind of outdated. Where the Giant Boss uses its Legacy version is where you expect Legacy versions to be used, so Legacy Fallen mode, Hardcore mode, the Legacy version of the Index, but also the Legacy version of Sandbox mode if you have the Legacy version enabled. And yes, if Enemies Beta was enabled for that map, so I believe not in Intermediate mode, because I swear I saw like this version appear, but in maps with Enemies Beta, this version of the Giant Boss would appear, which, even though it doesn't look that outdated, it still kind of looks outdated. Additionally, another change that the developers have made is to Jail Towers. They've actually replaced the icon for Jail Towers. Previously, the Jail Towers icon looked like this until the 12th of September 2025 when it was used in the Takeover event, and it was inexplicably changed to this, which is used for the Legacy modifier icon. I don't know why they changed it from this to this, given the fact that I believe Jail Towers was one of the only modifiers that actually looked like an actual modifier, but as in the icon looked like the actual modifier that the modifier modified, but that looks really weird why they changed it over to the Legacy modifier, given that this actually fitted the Jail modifier icons. They also changed the description. So previously it was once per wave a tower type will be jailed. So I guess for extra clarification they changed it to every wave a new tower from your loadout is disabled. So that is more clear than once per wave. So once per wave sounds like, oh, like some time period during the wave a tower type will be jailed. So they have just clarified it, which I guess kind of makes sense. The modifier also does not appear in the bottom left hand corner in Jail Towers. It does in Skater Park, which is weird in my opinion. But the most important thing about the changes to Jail Towers is the fact that you can now actually sell your towers with the Jail Towers modifier if your tower is jailed. It is listed as a glitch on the wiki. I would have to assume that either the developers changed it specifically for Skater Park and it just permeated into Jail Towers, or it was an accidental glitch. I don't know which one it is. Now, in other news, the developers, they have changed the add rewards boost so that it now has an icon and it doesn't appear as prominently as like the return to lobby stuff. So here you can see there is the watch an ad for 50 coins button, but it appears here alongside like your statistics rather than appearing here saying play again or watch an ad for 50 coins or whatever. So it used to appear here, watch an ad for 50 coins and return to lobby. So yeah, it used to be quite prominent. But no, the developers decided we're not going to do that. Also, I didn't realise that there was also a play again button. Does that mean it just resets the whole map and you just grind it out over and over again? That seems okay, fair enough. I would have to assume that the developers, they made it smaller to, I guess, tone down the... I don't know why there is controversy around the add reward boost button. it's a button. You're not forced to watch an ad. You can watch an ad for 50 coins, and I think it's a good deal to watch an ad for 50 coins. But you have the choice not to watch it. It's not like it affects your gameplay too much. It doesn't affect your gameplay, actually, at all. It only affects if you get 50 coins or not. You can ignore it. But yeah, everyone's making a big palaver out of it. Also, something that I didn't point out in my previous video about the updates is that the items, or the Triumph Rewards, which gives you an item, as you can see here, 4 damage flags, it now tells you the quantity of the item, the consumable items that you get, and the game assumes that you know what the item you're given is. May not be the case for something like the Sandcastle, but given the fact that there's limited real estate for the amount of text that can appear here to describe what the item is, I think the number is more appropriate, given that you will eventually learn what the item is if you check your inventory and your consumable item tab. But another change that the developers have made here, which I failed to talk about, is the fact that these enemies that appear here, they now play their idle animation. Yes, even the farm plays its idle animation. It doesn't have one. Additionally, the developers, they've made it so for some reason, the Patient Zero, it only rage modes at half of its default health. So as you can see here, the Patient Zero is at 33,000 health in intermediate mode, where it has 100,000 health, but it still hasn't raged mode. This is because half of its default health in Tower Defense Simulator is 12,500. How's that the case? Because the developers have changed the default health of Patient Zero. Patient Zero's default health is now 25,000, so half of that is 12,500. So Patient Zero only rage modes in the last 12.5% of its health in intermediate mode, meaning that Patient Zero is actually now less of a threat in intermediate mode and has been nerfed. So yes, I guess it slightly balances out the change that the slime has gotten a lot more, 10 times more powerful in intermediate mode, given the fact that its health has been buffed from 100 to 1,000. But Patient Zero, yeah, I don't think it was that much of a threat, I'll be totally honest, and its rage mode being decreased down to 12.5% of its health in intermediate mode isn't that much of a big deal, but it is something, I guess. I can't believe from the 20th of September 2023, the same time that the Giant Boss rework was posted, there were some other things that were leaked that we didn't realise until nowadays. Like, for example, this is very clearly Patient Zero. It was meant to be part of the 2.0 update, yet the 2.0 update never actually released. But we did eventually get everything here. New difficulty, yes, intermediate mode. New boss, Patient Zero. 2 new towers, I guess, the mercenary base and then the Gatling gun. New enemies, new skins, new maps. Yeah, they actually were all fulfilled, eventually.